started practicing the strategy pass hack, using save states to quickly dish out attempts and analyzing the input string to determine the cause of each failure. In just 2 weeks, the 3 most inconsistent strategies in the entire run had all received deterministic, frame-dependent setups that made them wildly inconsistent. P-Bird was the last motivation that I needed to attempt to get a sub 3 on my own before finally hanging the hat. And it didn't take long before I got something going. On day 1, I already had a run on 257 pace going into level 11, but I ended up failing P-Bird. I also became the first to hit the setup in a run that should have been a small PB, but level 12 again had other plans. The next day, I started another stream that drew my largest live audience ever. People wanted to see all the new strategies pulled off in a world record, and I was playing the game better than I ever had. I got P-Bird again on a bad run, entered level 12 on 302 pace, and then messed up on the stairs, choking a top 3 spot for the second time. But the stream continued, and for one of the runs, Nifsky, Miniland, and Lakuki, 3 of the best Super Mario Bros. Speedrunners, were all watching at the same time. On this run, I nailed Bird 3 and Max 6 on my first try, only making one notable mistake before entering level 8. Now, I'll just let the rest of the run speak for itself.
No way. Thought for sure it was over.
No, I can't get this up.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Oh my god. Okay, nice. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm
It's not real, dude. It's not real. It's not real, dude. It's not real, dude.
No, real.
I'm actually gonna pass out. I'm gonna pass out. I'm literally gonna pass out. My hands are tingling, dude. I literally almost. I swear to God, I was this close to passing out. And they're still tingling, dude. My hands are still tingling. I swear to God, this is the weirdest feeling on the planet. They're like shaking, bro. The tingle just won't go away. Oh my gosh. This would have never happened if P-Bird 11 wasn't found.
Okay.
It never would have happened. I would have stopped at 306 and that would have been it. I would have stopped.
255.484. This was not supposed to happen.
I almost.
Just a few days prior, my PB was a 311, and I would have been satisfied improving that time by just 2 seconds before leaving the category for good. But a perfect storm of new setups and personal discovery led to the most legendary moment of my speedrunning career. The start of the run was good, but that insane hood launch in level 8 and an almost perfect plunger jump in level 9 made it my best pace ever by a mile. But instead of choking, I had the most clutch ending of my life. I nailed the super jump and the ball boost in level 10. I hit P-Bird again to go 4 and 7 in runs, and I didn't die in that pesky spike pit or mess up the stairs at level 12. It was my perfect speedrun. There was still a bit of room for improvement, but I was content ending my journey with Red Ball 1
Oh my
speed.
god, actually.
Especially given how unlikely it would be for more crazy setups to be found after this initial revolution. 2 days prior, I was simply illustrating a huge piece of Red Ball's incredible speedrunning history, but now I was the one writing it. And, of course, I did exempt myself from my own raffle for obvious reasons. Though I didn't think the game had many more breakthroughs in store, Bird Banana and Not Very Good had indeed found a setup for Resetless 4 back on June 10th, which was previously an IL-only strategy. Instead of resetting at the flag to change the position of the axe, giving plenty of time to perform the Death Warp, it was possible to get up the stairs fast enough to hit the Death Warp spot a cycle early. This saved around 1.5 seconds, but nobody was attempting it in runs due to it being wildly inconsistent. The setup was much better, but it unfortunately required 3 frame-perfect inputs, which made it not worth going for yet. Now, taking a slight detour for a moment, I'd like to mention the 120 levels category that was established on the Red Ball category extensions leaderboard earlier that year. As you probably guessed, this involved completing 10 consecutive 12 levels runs back-to-back, heavily inspired by the 11 times any percent category in Super Mario Bros. Because of how short the game is, a longer category like this demanded an even greater level of consistency during head-to-head races. People would sometimes joke about attempting a 1200 levels run, involving 112 levels runs back-to-back, but nobody was seriously considering it, given that it would require over 6 hours of focused gameplay while listening to the same 2-minute-long song over and over again. At least, that's what we all thought. Over 6 hours and 45 minutes into his 1200 levels run, XDXbox Jaja entered level 11 for the 100th time of the stream. Earlier, he had decided that he was going to go for sub-15 train on his final completion, obviously not expecting anything to come from it. At this point, his energy was completely drained, and he wanted nothing more than to just get the run over with. Sure, XDXbox Jaja was the expert of sub-15 train, but there was just no way that the stars would align at this moment for such a wildly inconsistent strategy. XDXbox Jaja was previously the first person to get sub-20 train in a run, but now he was also the first to get sub-15 train in a run under some of the craziest circumstances imaginable. Xbox closed out his run with a 646.03, founding a meme category that only 3 other people have dared to attempt in the years since. Shifting gears, it would be almost an entire month before a third player would pull off a sub-3, that runner being Yak27. However, on speedrun.com, the submission was filed under the name Sweden. Take a wild guess which country he's from. At the same time, Carmel was still pouring in attempts to try to take his record back. Carmel hadn't yet incorporated the Resetless 4 setup, but he did utilize a corner boost strategy which saved almost as much time. A week before Yak sub 3, he entered level 11 on world record pace for his 10th time. However, this run was so good that he could have scored himself a high 250 with an ideal ending. Sadly, he missed the frame-perfect jump during Peter, forcing him to complete the level normally. Thus, without sub-20 trade, a strategy that saved around 8 seconds, Carmel still scored another sub-3. By almost any metric, Carmel was a substantially better Red Ball player than I was. But we were opposites in the luck we had experienced with that one level. Unfortunately, Carmel's misfortune would continue, as his failed sub-20 train count continued to rise. P-Bird just wasn't his day, and he even decided to revert to the old sub-20 train approach for some runs to just try to gain some control. But it still wasn't working out. A few more weeks passed, and Carmel's failed sub-20 train count on record pace had risen to 18, including 2 runs that had gotten past the strategy, but then died in the spike pit in level 12. on a run that was almost a carbon copy of mine. Aside from slightly better execution in level 7 and 10, Carmel got ready to give P-Bird another go. He got past the spike pit, but this time, it was the stairs that attempted to kill another one of his runs. However, after a retime, the run was confirmed to be a 255.452, beating my record by just a single frame. Following in line with Yak, Carmel had changed his name to be Poland over on speedrun.com, meaning that 2 of the top 3 spots were now occupied by the entire might of some European countries. This run could have easily been a low 253 without the small mistake at the end, which would have placed it near the theoretical cap of 252 that was proposed in my sub 3 video. However, by this point, it was apparent that a sub 250 was going to happen at some point. Carmel had already been on high 250 pace in the past, and with a perfect run, it was certainly possible to achieve, even without incorporating any new strategies. Within the next month, 2 newer runners, Big Muck Muck and Odiug Retsum, became the 4th and 5th players to claim a sub 3. Odiug's run was actually on world record pace by a frame or 2 going into level 12, but that pesky spike pit dealt him another fatal blow. A day later, Pogwin became the 6th to get a sub 3. And since he and Odiug both went by their countries' names on speedrun.com, Lithuania and Brazil respectively, I was now surrounded on all fronts by 4 entire countries. It wasn't looking good for me. 4 days after that, Yak claimed the record with a 254.645, finally utilizing the resetless 4 setup to save a bit of time over Carmel. It had become much easier to practice thanks to Sage developing what is known as the frame offset hack. This practice hack allowed the player to paste in a pre-made string that defined the frame-perfect inputs and releases that were necessary for the setup. The bars on the bottom left provided a visual for how early or late each input was, with perfect inputs being in the middle, early inputs being on the left, and late inputs being on the right. The community would create a database of these input strings, eventually giving players multiple options for strategies to attempt in each level. However, a week after Yak's record, Carmel was still going for the corner boost approach in level 4, and despite losing 2 seconds after messing it up, he still snapped back with a 253.548. Competition simmered down again after this, but in October, Bird Banana cooked up yet another frame-dependent setup, and this time, it was larger than anything that had come before. Previously, Bird Banana had found a setup for level 10 that required a single frame-perfect input and avoided resetting at this flag to make the cycles more favorable. However, since it only saved around a second, it was not worth going for runs. In contrast, this new setup saved over 4 seconds. Yes, it did require 4 frame-perfect inputs, but they were all with the same key, and they had a bit of a rhythm. 3 days later, I affirmed its viability by nailing the full thing in an individual level set. With this, getting a sub 250 no longer required a perfect run. It was more attainable than ever, and with the floodgates open, Carmel, me, and Pogwin all started doing attempts to shatter what we all thought to be Red Ball's final barrier, for real this time. Unfortunately, we all struggled immensely when it came to executing the strategy in a full run. It wasn't until November 1st that Carmel finally became the first to do it, which placed him on 251 pace before he failed Peter. However, on the same day that mental barrier was torn down, the community was faced with its most important decision yet. Should the randomness of Spike Glitch be removed? Let's take a massive step back to understand why this was even being considered in the first place. If you have watched my Red Ball Tats Explain video, then you are probably aware that Spike Glitch, the oversight that makes it possible to jump into spikes without dying, is dependent on a variety of factors that are largely outside of the player's control. By pausing and unpausing the game, individual spikes are only able to kill the player if they overlap themselves for 2 consecutive frames. The collision check is performed between some test points on red ball's circumference and the rendered pixels of the spike. And because of anti-aliasing, spike glitch is more effective the higher the resolution of the game. This made spike glitch way more consistent for people playing in full screen on 1080p monitors compared to those needing to play the game at its default resolution of 550 by 400 out of performance concerns, like XTX Jaja. Indeed, Flash is so badly optimized that even a simple game like Red Ball can have significant performance issues on lower-end machines. And as it turned out, those performance issues could prove even more fatal than reducing the resolution due to the second factor that controlled spike glitch, varying frame times. You see, Flash is not consistently able to render each frame in perfect intervals. Red Ball's frame rate of 31 yields an intended frame time of 32.258 milliseconds. But you can have some frames last a good bit more or less than this, especially on lower-end machines. Because the function that is supposed to smoothly pan the camera is based on real time, having faster frames followed up by slower frames causes visible jerkiness on the screen. If you look hard enough at almost any recording of the game shown thus far, you'll be able to notice this clear as day. For spike glitch, this jerkiness has a devastating side effect. If the screen doesn't pan by as much as it should in a given frame, it greatly increases the likelihood that a spike will overlap itself for 2 consecutive frames, possibly causing Red Ball to die. Therefore, the randomness behind spike glitch wasn't even RNG in the traditional sense, since there wasn't any actual randomness programmed into the game. Instead, it was entirely reliant on system factors outside of the game's sandbox, including operating system, hardware scheduling, process priority, computer specs, and several other things that are basically impossible to control. However, the overall trend was clear. People with slower computers were at a significant disadvantage when it came to spike glitch due to having more inconsistent frame times. But you don't just have to take my word for it. Here is the same input sequence in level 9 being replayed on my computer versus my slower laptop. As you can see, the difference is astonishing. Because of how much of a nuisance this was when making tasks of the game, a solution had already been found and implemented in the task hack to make spike glitch completely deterministic. All it took was this one-line code change to the tweet, making it scroll based off the intended frame time rather than the actual frame time. As a much welcomed side effect, this also completely removed the jerkiness from the camera, which previously limited some people's ability to play the game for long periods due to causing them eye strain. Armed with all of this knowledge, the community had to decide whether a modified version of the game with this one change would be allowed for real-time speedruns. Tallying the votes from over 100 Red Ball speedrunners, 89.6% of them voted in favor of allowing the deterministic patch, and it was allowed in runs starting on November 5th. A variable was created on the GameSpeedrun.com page to differentiate runs performed on the deterministic patch versus the standard version. While the main purpose of the patch was to level the game's playing field, it did have the notable side effect of making spike glitch way more consistent. As long as you had enough speed to make the spikes not overlap before jumping in, you were essentially invincible. While most people welcomed this, Carmel strayed from the pack and decided that he wanted to get a sub 250 on his terms without the deterministic patch, and it wouldn't take him long to get some more insane paces.
Yeah, this could be a dark version, alright. Oh my god. Let's play this very Okay. Nice.
attempting resetless 10 for the 14th time on easy sub 250 pace, he unfortunately mistimed one of the frame perfects and had to settle for doing a backup strategy, which ended up being just as fast as the usual method thanks to a very clean ending. Staying composed, he nailed P-Bird and survived the spike pit in level 12 despite playing on the standard version, ending with a new record of 253.226. Almost a month after people had started attempting resetless 10 and runs, not a single person had hit the strategy on sub 250 pace, speaking volumes to its difficulty. The next day, Norxor was streaming attempts in hopes of getting his first sub 3. He got onto a run that was pretty lackluster out of level 9, but with resetless 10 in his back pocket, he still had a chance of pulling it off. Much to his shock, he got it. Sure, he still had P-Bird ahead, but if he was able to close out his first sub 3 in this manner, it would certainly be one for the history books.
What's that? Okay, I don't have money.
After Nor's legendary choke, I started a stream going for sub 250 with resetless 10. And after putting together a run that had Bird 3, resetless 4, and max 6, I finally became the first person to hit it on 2-4x pace. It was time to clutch up once again.
Game face. What happened? What? Dude, are you kidding me? Give me a break, man. Dude, no! Alright, come on. Let's get wrecked.
Are you kidding me?
What a drag. Dang it, I never messed that up. Literally never messed that up.
Tragically, I jumped slightly late after landing on this slope, which threw off my ending. And due to the game's flawed method of determining whether red ball can jump or not, I didn't get a jump after landing on the ground. I could have still gotten the record, but I messed up people anyway. What a letdown.
What the hell?
However, the keen-eyed among you may have noticed that the
Okay, you
camera
got it now?
was jerking
What the
a
hell?
lot during that footage. I wasn't playing on deterministic damage. However, unlike Caramel, this wasn't intentional. I thought that I was. During that week of attempts, I was dying to spikes a lot more than I should have, but I assured myself that I was probably just hitting some unlucky input sequences that always yielded death. I was so used to the game's jerkiness back in the day that it just didn't register with my brain that anything was off. It wasn't until I reviewed this footage while researching for this video that I noticed my catastrophic mistake. If I was just playing on the right version of the game, I would have likely gotten more paces into the late game that could have resulted in a new world record, or even the first sub 250. Oh, what could have been. But that didn't change the fact that Caramel was accomplishing much more than I was, despite having the same reputation. 3 days later, he finally hit resetless 10 on sub 250 pace without screwing up the ending too badly, and geared up for an attempt at P-Bird. Sadly, it didn't go his way, and he ended with a 258 without sub 20 train. 9 days later, he got it on pace for the second time, and came up with an entirely new way of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Welcome to the club, Caramel. Welcome to the club. The run was still world record pace going into the train, but P-Bird did him dirty yet again. However, he quickly picked himself back up, and that same day, he started a run with blisteringly fast pace. Well, he jumped a frame late at the start of level 10, and the recovery efforts were quite slow. That was probably curtains. But hold on a second. His best possible time still showed a 249. Well, his sum of best at the time was compiled from his best individual level times, meaning that it included his level 11 PB of 15.387 seconds, or 18.21 seconds with the transition. Since he had never hit a train like that in a run, Carmel smartly opted to just go for P-Bird in hopes of achieving a new record. And that decision paid off. 252.484. At this point, Carmel was becoming much better versed with resetless time, often able to pull it off multiple times in a row during practice. As I shifted my focus to completing my Red Ball 2 world record progression video, my sub 250 attempts came to a screeching halt, leaving Carmel as the clear favorite to be the one to pull it off. He kept grinding away, and on the 1st of December, he hit resetless 10 for the second time on sub 250 pace. He lost almost 2 seconds after getting screwed over by the slope at the end, but it was still barely fast enough. Unfortunately, the curse of P-Bird struck yet again. December 30th, Carmel misses the corner boost in level 4, but he maintains a solid pace for the rest of the run and hits resetless 10. He almost pulls a Nor at the end, but it only ends up costing him a second. 249 is still possible with P-Bird, but just barely.
What the fuck?
Okay.
Come on, what's that? Oh no! I can't believe I missed a P-Bird.
Oh, okay. I shouldn't do that, right?
The stupidest way to it.
Maybe I should.
Unreal. With Carmel taking longer than expected to pull off the sub 250, other runners started catching up, poised to claim the first 2-4X for themselves at a moment's notice. The entire country of Lithuania, represented by Pogwin, claimed a 251.226 on December 9th. The difference between this run being a simple PB and shattering the game's final barrier was essentially just this awkward transition between levels 8 and 9, which lost over a second. Pogwin didn't hit resetless 4 either, which could have also put it over the mark. 4 days later, the entire country of Sweden, represented by Yak27, claimed
251.
251, yeah.
Good job.
Okay, you know what? Let's
Fuck.
252.129, which meant that the whole top 3 was now occupied